What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another Lost Skies Skywatch update, where we go over all the most recently shared public information released by the devs from Bossa Studios regarding the development of Lost Skies as a whole. Now, the most recent Skywatch release has both some exciting information and some sad. Firstly, we have been shared some of the newest photos from inside the pre-alpha release of Lost Skies to the development community. These were also showed off in Bossa's recent press release of Lost Skies, which has helped to bring in more eyes on the project. Nonetheless, the team over the past few weeks has been hard at work trying to create the best form of a playable build to their pre-alpha, and they are proud to say that they have reached a point that they can actually consider to be just that. Now, they also state here that it does not mean they are rushing towards an alpha build, as it's definitely not a feature-complete setup, and is still being shared with the community to gather feedback on some of the features and gameplay loops. However, it does represent a significant step forward for their development program. Now, as to the good news, they have been able to capture some truly cinematic shots, which they shared in both the press release and this Skywatch. So, to start off, we have some breathtaking photos of one of the characters crouched and looking down on many of the different structures we've seen run through the dev's tutorial island, with the estranged metallic piping structures extruding from the different floating sections, and the strange, almost sideways clock tower looking structure we have seen in one of the previous clips. Not only that, but we get to see the amazing works the devs have put into adjusting the lighting of the clouds, with the beautiful sun setting in the distance, casting some awesome sun rays and shadowed effects. Now, a quote is provided by Luke Williams, the lead designer of Lost Skies, from their press release to caption this photo, and he states, "Alongside our playtest of the game, we have also released a playtest build of our Island Creator tool, which allows players to build their own floating islands and upload them. Our current pre-alpha playtest has been added to new islands to explore, including islands made by our community, which already shows off the complexity and beauty of our islands, which hints at the fact that they have other islands separate to the islands already made by the community." Next, we have a stunning close-up of a player using the Gull saw blade, as we had mentioned in previous posts. Now, to those of you who are new, and even those who have seen some of the previous Skywatches, the Gull saw blade is essentially a gathering tool you will use to chop down trees, where you can hurl and throw your charged attack of the saw blade at the trees to cut them down with some visually intriguing VFX, in which the blade will shoot back, returning to your saw blade holster. But now we are actually seeing a close-up of the culmination of their work, where before we had seen the different stages of the VFX work and the 3D modeling being done for it, which never represented the final thing. But now we get to see all the awesome details, with the glowing components on the tool itself activating when the blade is thrown, and the beautiful blue glow of the actual blade either being thrown or retracted back in this image, as well as some pretty foliage surrounding the player. Now, the next photo the devs have released is something that completely caught even me off guard here. It's photos of the current build of the glider. Now, what kind of confused me here was simply how it looked, as in both the game's predecessor Worlds Adrift and even in past Skywatches we've covered, the plans for the glider were set to be similar known designs, where the glider was more of a backpack-like equipable item, which would extend out from you with two wings and an accompanying tail fin. However, this design is nothing at all like what we have seen. Now, while there's no information provided on the details of this completely new glider, I suspect looking at the kind of rickety design, it's probable that it's just supposed to be an early game design of the glider that you might use at the start of the game, as the planned glider we have seen previously was comparably more a futuristic type look overall, as opposed to this, and nonetheless it is an interesting style. Also, one more small thing to mention here is the background ship in this photo. Now, I'd imagine that this is likely to be the ruins of some kind of Saborian crash ship framework, but as we have now seen in the last Skywatch cover, and as you will see in a bit here, we know that the Gaul Arc ships are also something that are in for consideration of this type as well. Anyways, next we get to see a close-up inside the strange prismatic looking structure we saw in the first image, with the two players swinging about with their grappling hooks, and we can see all the high level of details in the overgrown vines and different geometric designs of the structure. Not only that, but we can see on the bottom section what appears to be a new rework of chess, one glowing red here, and either one that is glowing blue on the left here, or is some kind of Saborian Gaul type device. Now, while it's unclear if the red glowing type chests we have briefly been shown are just different redesigns as to the blue ones we've seen, if I had to guess, I could foresee them possibly having those red color chests be locked up, and you would have to use some sort of puzzle system to unlock or power those locked loot caches, so the player can access it, obviously. And as we saw back in some of the previous Skywatches, they had planned to add different functioning puzzles with the data relay and the different buttons and switches for activations of different things. So using that same information, it's possible that it is the kind of direction they are going with these different colored chests that we have seen. Nonetheless, I think the devs have done an awesome job with these different cinematic captures. Next up, we are getting some breathtaking photos of the prefab ship that has been shown off in past Skywatches, the first of which I hadn't actually seen in the press release article, and I have to say they're just insane. The level of detail they put into the clouds, the fog, and the ship is just overall amazing. Not only that, but we can see the prefab ship's look is a lot more cleaned up from before, where we can see the metallic canopy has a ton more accented details, as well as the ship's helm, which some of you may recognize from Worlds Adrift, and if you squint your eyes, you can see kind of a strange device behind the character, and as it's not really clear as to what that may be, you can just barely see some hint of green poking out there. So let me know what you guys think in the comments what that might be, because frankly I have no clue. Now in the second image here, we get to see an awesome nighttime look at the island, with many of the previous structures showing off the different moonlight reflections and fog effects. Now it appears that during the nighttime, the level of fog cover drastically increased, and as it was something they wanted to work on previously, I think it would add an additional level of scariness to the feel of the island, and it does give a stronger degree of mystery from the things that you just simply can't see due to the fog. Now, Luke provides another caption for these photos here, saying that our most recent playtest has introduced new shipbuilding tools, but our goal is to give players an unprecedented level of freedom to sculpt and customize their floating homes. The heroes of Lost Skies are nomads, and instead of building a camp and defending it, players acquire resources and knowledge to build stronger and faster and deadlier ships, to venture out into the fiercer storms and battle against the threats beyond the horizon. Now, quickly going back to the fog, while I can't exactly be certain as to the nature of how it works in terms of affecting the islands, I believe it's safe to say that it will be somewhat of an effect you can add to your island in the creator tool. As we have seen similarly in Skywatch 13, one of the players made an island called Our Scurries. It was by Budgie94, and they made an island utilizing a heavy amount of fog, explaining that their island was made to be a difficult place to spot amongst the clouds, and that it had sudden strong winds which had led to many different wrecks and jettisoned cargoes. And even in this last photo of their island, we can clearly see on the top of their given tower an example where a loot cache is placed. There is a visually windy effect, likely representing a strong airstream to make it more difficult to reach. And I think these examples provide a clear enough set of reasoning to assume that in those capacities, you will have that level of control over your own island, not only to make it completely from scratch using all the newest assets, but even to control the concentration of fog in some respects, and even the locations of different wind shafts themselves as a means of making different areas of the island harder or easier to reach. Which, at the very least, I think this type of control over fog placement can be beneficial for creating areas for dangerous monsters or enemies to spawn, or in some respects could even be furthered in the fog or cloud development by the devs to help reveal some, island-sized monsters that they might plan to add in the future, as we've been hinted at in the Lost Skies trailer. As personally, I would think that while there could be different types of set spawn locations in the skies, that if players happen to fly through, they would encounter these large, dangerous enemies, but also the devs could work on a different set of weather systems, say like rolling storms that move across the skies and hit the islands, which could increase the spawn rate of certain types of enemies, or could be used temporarily as an event for, certain types of bosses to spawn. Nonetheless, I think it's clear that they could go any number of directions in these aspects, and it would be cool to see how it all unfolds. Moving on to the last cinematic press release shots, we get an image showing all the newest made creatures and some of the close-ups showing the character's gear, where here we can see the different male and female work deer models, the Nautilus, also dubbed as the Naughty Boy by the dev team, and the flying mantas hovering above, and even, of course, all the beautiful autumnal foliage, environment stuff that we have only been briefly shown. Now, another thing I want to mention here is the glowing thing on the belt of the left player here. For those who haven't seen it, back in Skywatch 10, we covered the use of the Gaul creation disc. This was primarily planned to be used for the different shipbuilding menus, and while we have been shown a different mock-up of images for the animations of the tool itself, we hadn't been fully shown the look in the game or on the player. As now I think it's clear to say that it is a side belt accessory, and on the right, the other player appears to actually be using his creation disc. And while I know it's a bit overkill in the analyzation here, if we look at the provided images back in Skywatch 10, we can see the sets of proposed designs for different modes of the animation, where the only one showing the player actually having his hand held up and looking at it, we can compare this to the new image here that we now have, and likely guesstimate he is in the menu mode of some kind. And of course, to top it all off, we get to see the players' neat looking nomadic themed outfits with they just look fantastic, honestly. Now, aside from the captures, we have some early UI mockups from the team's UI artist, Ellen. So they created a few of these a while back with a bunch of different concept icons and menus. Now, one thing I want to mention here, going back to the from the glider, this text here, it says the UI photo saying discovered makeshift glider schematic, which as of reading that now, that clears up the concern of the glider before, so clearly this is going to be the early game glider that the player will eventually get access to. We also get another photo showing the side UI with the familiar pistol that some of you may know from Worlds Adrift, which is now dubbed the Captain's Revolver, as well as the different icons of plant fibers, minerals, and tech capsules, whatever those may be, and even some clear indications of what looks like directed missions or side info for the tutorial. And there's even stuff showing the controller support functions for different icons on the opposing side. Now, these next set of images show the UI with different languages on the side tabs, as well as the mockups for the testing scale of the UI that had to be put into consideration for converting English words and languages to other forms with the same definition, where in the first image we can see some of the different icons named for the shipyard, Gaul disc, and many others in the top right, as we can see the different language forms of those different words. And next we can see the section for schematics UI with those associated subdivisions without inputted icons yet. But on the right we can get an example for the officer's revolver with a blue rarity and testing leveling systems, which show off the different pros and cons of the weapon on the right side in a different language, and also some consecutive images showing the progression tests for the leveling UI, which have little green arrows on the side showing the increased stats and sections for that respective weapon. And even one showing the blue pistol level being put up to level 20 with the indication saying enhanced, which may hint at some form or another of being able to not only upgrade your weapons, but temporarily boost them and their effects in some unknown way. Now, moving on to the equipment, we get an example showing off the different test structures for gear and accessories, with the gauntlet, glove, pants, and torso being showed on the left, and the status effects on this player are currently showing the well-rested buff, which increases health regen by 50%, gives stamina regen increased by 100%, with the player's current debuffs being hot, which increases stamina consumption by 25%, and a poison effect which makes you take 3 damage every 5 seconds. And these next few images show some testing for the crafting UI. So this shows off some of the different degrees of schematics testing structures, where it seems that you will have different levels of starred weapons and rarity, which even has its own colored format, and even a section of material costs and the crafting queue. Another thing to mention here in the second image is a small green plus and arrow icon next to the metal ingot, which goes with the additional green buffed effects on the gun's stat. Now, while this is not clearly stated if this is a for sure thing, it did remind me of some of the similar level control over the building back in Worlds Adrift, where it seems to similarly indicate how the Worlds Adrift situation, where you'd craft different ship parts with different materials and you'd get different kinds of buffs or debuffs to that part depending on the materials that you use to craft that item. Similarly, in Worlds Adrift, if you use like something like lead to build the walls or your ship's engines, it would be heavily defended, but would be severely affected by your ship's speed, as lead is very dense. And of course, that would also affect engine startup, the fuel consumption, and other factors as well. Now, I'd imagine similarly in this icon section, it's possible they go with the same kind of structure for their weapons creation, but again, it's important to mention that everything you have seen here is subject to change in almost every regard. So nothing is set in stone per se, as of all these are just mock-ups and tests that the devs are still trying to sift through and work on to make it the most optimized formatting. Now, in the last photo we get in regards to the game's UI functions, we have a depiction of the player in the inventory UI, where they have set up a section for the backpack, stash, and belt, which again is reminiscent of Worlds Adrift, with a piece of the right side showing the possible set bonuses for gear and equipment as well, and even showing off what looks like different coloration of the Gaul undersuit from Skywatch 12, which is your starter clothing, so to speak, which will provide little to no protection, but is your basic life support gear. Now, moving on, in the last Skywatch, the devs shared a couple of stunning wallpapers that the team's talented artist Jonathan Betts had made, which were inspired by the latest build of Tutorial Island. Here they wanted to show off a couple of the in-game shots alongside his artwork to try and recreate those scenes, where you may have noticed in the second image they have a basic shaped gray box for the Gaul crashed Ark ship, which they mention is not completely done in terms of its texture model. It's still in the works, and they still wanted to hear what everyone's thoughts on it were in the future, but for now it is just a placeholder. Now, moving on to the island showcase. First off, we have an awesome house made by Ugly, who used the creator tool. The team was extremely impressed with his attention to detail that he put into his piece, and from what I can tell, he must have made this from scratch, where you can see all the little details of the wood beams and slanted roofing, which makes this a very cute little home. Next up, we have another mention to Budgie, who once again knocked it out of the park with their newest island. With no actual water in the island crater as of now, she used her imagination to make this fake lake, and used the recently added drone puzzle asset and pathing as fake fish, which flip through the ground, that is the lake, to give it the effect of the little fishies popping out of the water, as well as incorporated fog and glowing plants to give it a swampy lake look, which even in these nighttime photos looks absolutely beautiful. And to top it off, we even get to see a video showing this effect. As you can see, she walks down onto the lake dock, where you can see those beautiful glowing little drones popping out of the ground to give it that quote-unquote fishy effect. And you even get to see some of the little blue glowing fireflies hovering over the lake near some chest loot as well. Now, unfortunately, that is all I have for today's Skywatch, and as to the sad news I mentioned at the beginning, this Skywatch will be the last one of the 2023 year. Now, fret not, as the team is taking a nice long holiday break from their hard work, but we'll be back in 2024. Also, you guys should keep an eye on the Lost Skies Reddit and Twitter pages, as they may still post some unmentioned content regarding the game there. But regardless, we can be sure that the team will be back sometime after January 1st. Also, I want to remind you guys, for those who have not yet signed up for the open development community, the last set of invites will be sent out this coming week. So if you haven't already signed up, I will have the links posted to sign up for all of that in the description below. So sign up fast and try to get a spot, because I am sure there are many of you out there who want to start work on your own original islands that may even get shared in future Skywatches. So I can't wait to see what you guys come up with next. And before you go, I just want to mention real quick that I was messing around on Photoshop and some editing software with some old Worlds Adrift logos, and created a few different designs that I shared on my most recent community post, and even made one for my phone's home screen. So if you'd like, I will have all of those photos posted in my personal Discord server, and they are completely free to download and use for whatever you would like. And I will of course have the link to that posted in the description as well. So if you ever want to reminisce about the good times in Worlds Adrift and have that everywhere you go. You are more than free to use them. Regardless, I hope this Skywatch was somewhat informational and helped keep you up to speed on everything regarding Lost Skies, and be sure to let me know what you think of everything going on in the comments below. But regardless, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Peace.